Hello and welcome to This Podcast Cannot Continue, episode 16, a podcast about video games by two friends. Ben, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. You got your PS5. That's exciting.
That's true. And, there's a funny sort of irony in what happened when I received it, which is that, I excitedly played about an hour of Astro's Playroom. And then in the background, I was installing some games. I got a Ratchet & Clank bundle for Rift Apart, so I was installing that off the CD while I was playing Playroom, and I was downloading some other games, like I was downloading Genshin FF7 Remake, the PS5 version, and I bought Demon's Souls, and those are all, they're still downloading as we are having this conversation, but Genshin finished first, and the funny irony is, I'm excited to play all these new games, and I've spent most of the afternoon playing a game that I've already been playing for, not like tons and tons of tons, but have been playing off and on for like the past year. So
yeah,
there's a funny irony in that, but I will tell you that the game looks fantastic at 4K 60, and I had only a base model PS4, which is what I was playing that one on previously, and that game would be like 1080p, like 25, and then maybe even like down to 20 or even as low as 15 frames per second in like really hectic combat scenarios.
Sure.
Like that game would slideshow hard, so it's a pretty night and day difference, and I don't mind treading ground. I've already treaded a little bit with all of these upgrades in place. But I think after this call and after an FF14 commitment I have after this call, when I go back to playing some PS4, by then Demon's Souls will be done, and I'll be playing that for the rest of the night.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I can imagine you, because you've done all the Dark Souls and Bloodborne, so you're ready to sink your teeth into some Souls again.
And I've already played about half of Demon's Souls on PS3, but...
right on, yeah.
I want this better, more, remastered experience, so I'm really happy to take another run at it and hopefully finish it this time.
I'm really excited for you, yeah. I'm still keeping my eyes out for any restocks. I'll pull the trigger next time. I couldn't do it this time because they only had really, really expensive bundles, and I really just need the base model, but...
I can't believe that, so with the game would have been $89.96. The controller would have been $89.96, and I got a disc edition, which is $629.96 or something. These are all Canadian prices. So the bundle comes out to like $809. Sorry, I bumped my mic. The bundle comes out to about $809. So it's like a really expensive bundle, and that's before tax. And this is Canadian dollars, by the way, before any U.S. listeners are like freaking out about these numbers.
Yeah, that's true.
But in terms of Canadian dollars, like this, it feels like it's way too much to spend on a console. But at the same time, I'm somebody who prefers to have two controllers. I had two with my PS4, and I would always like leave one on the charger and use the other one wirelessly. And like I loved like being able to be like, oh, I forgot to plug in my controller last night. Now I don't have to sit there and play wired. I can just plug that one in, and the other one was on the whatever. I mean, I've forgotten to plug in both and suffered that fate. But in general, it means I can always use one wirelessly with relatively full battery. And the game, honestly, the truth is I actually wasn't going to buy Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart.
Really? That's like if I didn't buy the bundle, though.
If I didn't buy the bundle, I probably wasn't going to buy that game.
Okay.
But I also am not so disinterested that I'm like, now that I have it, it's not like I'm not going to play it. I will play it. I'll check it out. I don't mind that. But for me, it wasn't a console. Like that wouldn't have been a console seller for me. I wouldn't have bought it.
If I got a PS5 only, like first thing I would have bought, and essentially the first thing I did buy was Demon's Souls. Right. That's what I'm going for first. Yep. Then I want to play that 7 remake. Yuffie chapter. Plus, I want to just replay the base game. That's what I would do. And that's the first thing.
I'm looking forward to some stuff that's coming out down the line. So.
Oh yeah, there's some titles coming out. It'll be a necessity for me, but for now I wait. Wait. Okay. Well.
Topics.
Yeah, topics.
Do you have any news? I should ask.
Besides the fact that Final Fantasy III really threw me for a loop the other night.
Did you finish it?
No, I didn't finish it. This is as backstory to this. I got to the end of Final Fantasy 3 and got a hard game over at the final boss because I wasn't aware that there was more stuff to do in the World of Darkness.
It's a pretty tough run.
It was like 2 hours of gameplay just erased, and I was like, well, yeah, okay. So I'm gonna go back at it. Just I didn't feel like doing it right away. That's not news. Let's see. Yeah, let's just go into topics.
Excuse me.
Let's do it.
Cool.
Let's get straight into it.
I think I went first last time. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, we did E3, so we kind of did the thing, but before that you did, I believe. Yeah, so so my topic is, and this is great, this is why I kind of want to ask you about your PS5, as I know you got it. It's because I want to talk about maybe, I think we're going to look back on it as like a defining generation, but also one of the hardest to go back to. Okay, so let me explain. Some backstory.
Which generation? Can you clarify exactly what the actual...
I'm going to get there.
Okay.
Yeah. So like everybody, to varying degrees, not everybody, but there's people who like retro games. They go back to NES, or even some people go back to as far as like Atari. There's people who love Game Boy, there's people who love Super Nintendo, Genesis, Master System. You got N64 and PS1 nerds. You got people who even GameCube, PS2. There's like a growing community of people who really love the games from that era, correct?
Yeah.
So where I'm leading with this is, what about, this generation's a weird one because it has the Wii in it, but I don't want to really talk about the Wii, which seems weird. I want to specifically talk about the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 because I really think that generation lasted a really long time, had some really high points in it. Like I had some great games in there that I really loved playing, but man, oh man, there were so many just like generic samey first-person shooters, third-person action games. It's just like, it really feels like that was the generation that defined kind of like what the current landscape would be, but for a short amount of time, kind of like in the days of the mascot platformer and the fighting games in like the 16-bit era and the 32-bit era, 32 and 64 depending, you had this like everybody needed a third-person. If you were a company, you needed a third-person action shooter with... this is where all the tropes of like super unsaturated palettes and everything's brown and all the ads are blue and orange color schemes, and you have the protagonist is always Joe Nobody, white dude with brown hair kind of thing. That's the generation that did that.
A little bit of stubble.
Yeah, exactly. And it's
if you're Gears of War or if you're StarCraft 2, maybe the cigarette, except the caveat. I remember the controversy, so this is a little off topic, but I remember the controversy of when Blizzard removed the cigarette from the Space Marines, the Terran Space Marine guys. Picture for like the concept art. Like when they first were showing StarCraft 2, he's like in his helmet, right? And it was just like a shot of his face as like the box art, and he had a cigarette, and the smoke was like fogging up his helmet a little bit, and it was this like kind of like cool thing. And in StarCraft 1, a lot of the pre-rendered cutscenes and stuff, the characters are like smoking and like kind of like soft swearing, like not like dropping F-bombs, but like your damn it's and your, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Kind of stuff that they used to do back in those days. And
for sure.
And then they took the cigarette out of the artwork in StarCraft 2 shortly after releasing the cigarette version, and people were like, they're like censoring StarCraft 2, and it's like there actually kind of is a part of me that gets this one because it's not offensive. It's more like, what do you want to like? It's the issue of like when you depict people smoking, are you promoting smoking to kids, right? Or like whatever, right? Which I think is a little bit different than like quote unquote censoring your game because of like it was like offensive like to somebody's identity or existence. You know what I mean? Like I actually do think it's kind of weird to like have done that to StarCraft. I'm normally not the type of person that freaks out when they like added a extra layer under Tifa's tank top or whatever.
Sure.
Like I don't care about that in the 7 remake. That's not my business. But I do think it's weird that they took the cigarette out.
Okay.
Because I think that like it was part of StarCraft's look is essentially what I'm saying, and they changed it.
Yeah, it was like a grim futuristic.
Anyway,
look.
I totally blew your topic. I'm sorry, but yeah, I just that's one of the really prominent ones from that era, even though it's a PC game and not a console game. But it's from the same era, right? It's from the same range of years. That's a really prominent one that fits like the white like marine with the stubble kind of like look to me.
Yeah, but that's not specifically what I'm getting at. I guess what I'm talking about is, do you think that generation is going to be hard to go back to because of this sort of like, everybody was like for example, like you had like Unreal 3 everywhere. You had games that were like weirdly optimized. People were doing like a lot of physics-based things, and it wasn't always good. There was a lot of cover-based shooters, which isn't bad because the good ones were really good, but the bad ones were just whatever. It was just, it was like a generation that had high points, and then so much of the rest of the catalog from that time was just so mediocre. And I also feel like that's when we really started to see the boardroom creep into the game design process really hard.
Yeah.
And as we've talked before,
this is the cigarette.
Exactly. And this is all, we brought it back. And this is also when you start to see them shoehorn multiplayer into games that don't think needed it. I think you saw a little bit of that prior to that, obviously, but I think this generation specifically, they really tried to shoehorn online multiplayer communities into almost every game. So you had this like sort of like generalized protagonist in a generalized war-torn setting, in a generalized gritty, desaturated environment, all of them using the same Unreal Engine, all of them using the same cover-based shooting. It's not just the cover-based shooters, though. There was like, it's just, do you think that generation will be looked back upon fondly by people in the future? Because once again, there are great games from that generation, actually. But there's a lot of weird stuff that happened in that generation that makes it, it's better than PS2, but it's not as good as like PS4 or PS5, obviously. And going back to it even now, it looks a little rough. It looks a little rough.
Remains to be seen.
This is true.
PS5 Series X kind of current. Like, there's like the two consoles have like a handful of games each that are really like exclusive to them. So it's a little hard to say that yet. But anyway, I see some of what you're saying. However, I also think that those generations were both so massive in terms of the numbers of games released on both platforms that I think even if there are huge swaths of games that fall into the stereotypes of the generation, I also think there's still a whole ton that don't. And that alone is enough for the people that don't want to play like the sort of generic kind of like boardroom pop hits of like gaming at the time. Like,
right.
If you want to put all that aside, like, and say you're not interested in it, it doesn't necessarily mean that whole generation is not for you or is to be overlooked or skipped by a given person. I do have some thoughts about what retro gaming that generation will be like in like the future. One of the things is this is one of the first generations where we saw, like, it's not like a port never happened before, but this is one of the first generations where we started to see, and even post that generation, like once we were already into the PS4 and Xbox One generation, we would see PS3 and 360 games get forward ports and PC ports.
Yes.
So where I'm going with this is I think this is going to be one of the first generations where people might play a lot of games from this generation, but they won't be like as a form of retro gaming when it's retro
I see.
Do so, whatever, but they won't be doing it on those consoles as much,
right?
And there won't be, I think, in my prediction, as much of a market for like preserving 360s or PS3s, because I think a lot, not all, but a lot of the games that people really wanted to play from that gen are available on more evergreen platforms like PC, or they've just been brought to other consoles.
That's a good point. Yeah, I can see that. Well,
those are my two immediate thoughts.
Okay, so Then let's pivot, because like I brought this up, but I want to say that I think that generation is really cool, and I think that people will have a lot of nostalgia for it, because I definitely already do. Like, I have a huge PS3 collection, and like the digital collection of stuff on my PS3 is huge too, not just PS3 games that I got digitally and only or whatever, but also the PS1 classics that are on there, the PS2 classics, some of them, they put some interesting stuff on it. So my PS3 is sort of like this weird digital arc of a bunch of, strange pieces.
Multiple generations, really.
Yeah, exactly. And it was kind of one of the first, at least Sony consoles to do that. Xbox, obviously, backwards compatible, same kind of thing. It had a lot going on. I think that the generation is cool.
I think that while you're mentioning old games, I think that in the sort of retro gaming space, like, we're getting ODEs and things for that for PS1, which are all really excellent. I actually think that a PS3 console is probably one of the best ways to play a PS1 game currently. You do get a fairly crisp upscale. It can be a little icky looking, but it's still a lot better than plugging like composite cables directly into like a modern HD TV out of a PS1 or something like that. You know what I mean? It's an HD output right off the board of the console, and it looks pretty great, runs pretty great. And you can play disc copies as much as you want.
That's the cool part.
I don't think you can do that with PS2 games unless you have like one of the specific ones that's
no,
compatible
you cannot.
that way though, right? So that's a little bit of like that's sort of like the maybe the dream for some people who want a PS3 to do it all, but I think for most people that are interested in just PS1, like you could be very satisfied with just picking up a PS3 and playing PS1 and 3 games and then pick up like a PS2 for that, or you just play the PS1 games or PS2, whatever. I don't know. Anyway, so I think even now it's not a bad idea to keep a PS3 around. Is essentially what I'm saying.
I think they're great, and there weren't a whole lot. The PS3 also is. PS3 and the Xbox 360, well, maybe the Xbox 360 a little less with Game Pass, but I was going to say the PS3 also has a lot of games that didn't make the jump to PS4. So some of them are actually just on that system. And
a lot of the JRPGs.
Exactly. So depending on what kind of like player you are and what kind of stuff you look for, the PS3 can have a catalog that may be locked to it going forward with Sony. I think this generation has some interesting things going forward if you want to collect it or start getting into it as it starts to become, like as the stores shut down, for example, and as you maybe, like I think they will continue, like Sony was saying when there was the whole thing about them shutting down the store for it, that they were going to, like updates were still available for games that you would buy, but they probably won't support
the store itself was going down.
They probably won't support that indefinitely, so I could see that being a problem in the issue too.
Yeah, I imagine the walkback they did on that is just like a hold, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because so I do agree with you that this is good. I know I came out of the gate kind of very critical of this generation. I think there's a lot of reason to be critical about this generation, but I do think there's a lot of good in there. I want to know if we're in agreement then that this generation is one worth going back to. And I do believe it is, especially because right now, if you want to get into gaming and want a catalog with just so many options, including the kind of, because even, you know, I've enjoyed a couple of those generic third-person cover shooters start to finish, when I've bought them cheap at a used store or whatever. The PS3 is a great system to do this on because you can just get whole collections of stuff for nothing. I got the Kingdom Hearts HD Remix collections, both of them, before 3, obviously, but the 2 that were on the PS3, and I paid like $14 for each of them. You know, and that's tons of game, that's tons of content. That's, you know, it's already an upscaled version of an older game. So are you playing in the PS4 complete version? No, you're not, but like you're not missing out on much either, really. It's more or less a similar experience. So I think there's a lot of pluses to the PS3, first and foremost being its current cost in 2021. I want to know what
another thing that you uniquely need a 360 for is, for some really bizarre reason, like it's universally known that PS3 like dramatically outsold the 360 in Japan.
Yes,
but
very much so.
For some reason that I don't know, a lot of arcade games, particularly shmups, released in Japan only and on the 360 only. So like a good example is Mushihime-sama Futari, which is kind of like a sequel to Mushihime-sama. I say it too fast and I stumble over it. That version of the game, if I'm not mistaken, it didn't get an NA release. It got a Japan release. I'm looking right here. It says platforms. It says iOS, which I think is interesting. Maybe that must be later. But I think that most enthusiastic people about shmups aren't really playing on iOS, so I don't really consider that like an ideal platform. And then it says arcade and Xbox 360. You know what I mean? And I think there are other cave games, and I think there are also other games from other developers that are like, that are these like Japanese arcade games that didn't get an NA release. Yeah, here. Okay, so I'm checking the Wikipedia page. JP, arcade, 360, worldwide iOS. So yeah, we never got a console or arcade version of Mushihime-sama Futari in NA, and the only JP like home console release was 360. Weird, right?
Yeah. Would you say
there are multiple games of this nature that are like kind of little known to us Westerners that came out on 360s. So I know a lot of people are enthusiastic to have 360s still for games like this.
For sure. Would you say that
for games like this, because it's like very like kind of twitchy gameplay and stuff like that, they want as little like latency as possible, and the fact that the 360 has analog outputs is a huge plus for that actually, because like modern flat screen displays have like a certain amount of inherent display lag, like they just all do, right?
Right.
Compared to CRTs. So like people who are really into those types of games, they want the 360 versions more than they want ports in many cases because they want to be able to use them on CRTs.
Would you say that maybe, now I know I've talked a lot about the PS3 because that's the system that I'm most familiar with, even though I have both of them. Would you say that because of Game Pass and some of what Xbox has been doing with their past catalog, that maybe the PS3 will be the one more likely to be collected and sort of preserved in the future, just because Sony doesn't seem as interested in bringing that PS3 catalog forward, whereas Xbox is sort of preserving the big titles in it? And
100%.
Yep. What PS3 games, and you can throw in Xbox 360 ones too, what would you recommend from this giant pool of mediocrity in a way? Well, because there are high points, and I think that's what makes the system worth it.
Are we trying to focus on the generation, or like what you can only play on one of these consoles now? You know what I mean? Because it's a tricky question.
Okay,
right?
Well, I'll just open up. I'll just open up to both. I'll open up to both, but without getting like just give me like a quick list of some hits that you think.
Sure. So I would say like for what you absolutely must be playing on a console from that generation, maybe the first one that comes to mind on 360, and it's funny that I'm saying it because I know you're gonna say it, and I have never played it, but I know that Lost Odyssey is a game that needs a mention from this generation.
I think it's on Game Pass though.
Are you sure?
I think so. I heard some story somewhere that the guy who like is the director of that just loves that game.
Okay, well that's interesting. If that's the case, then
I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough. I thought it was still locked to 360.
It might be. Its website. Sorry, its wiki page says Xbox 360 only. So that might be a lie.
I'll keep looking into that while we're talking. But the other one that comes to mind on the PS3 side, for me, is Drakengard 3.
Okay, yep, that's classic.
Really would be nice if that game would get a port or something, because the issue is if you want to play that game and you're playing it on the PS3, the performance, which is the only thing you can play it on, performance is garbage. I've heard that people who have really beefy PCs can emulate it and get like 60 FPS out of it, and higher than the original resolution and stuff like that, which is like fantastic. I've seen like video footage of that.
Yeah.
Looks excellent, but as you know, emulation can always be finicky, always can be tricky. There's a lot of people that don't really want to play via emulation, and even like my PC wouldn't be able to run that emulator. So it's
I'm just gonna jump in here real quick.
Yeah.
Lost Odyssey is not on Game Pass. I am incorrect. However, it is backwards compatible with the Xbox One, and it's a digital download. So yeah, there's that, and also there was
playable.
There was also a promotion in 2016 where everybody got it for free. Apparently,
if it's backward compatible with Xbox One, does that mean a Series X can just play it too?
I do not know.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with how that works.
But I would, if it's like the PS5 and with the PS4 digital games, like I would think maybe. So possibly.
I'm thinking. This is a total side note. This is the kind of thing I would tell you personally. We're mid-podcast, but I'm just going to say it anyway. I'm thinking that if, like, in a year, like, PC upgrades and PC parts and stuff like that are still, like, ridiculously out of stock, out of reach, and, like, priced beyond reason, like, $1,000+ video cards and stuff like that, then I actually might also be willing to pick up a Series X and go Game Pass.
I was thinking of getting a Game Pass one anyways, just because it seemed like such a deal.
Yeah, it does.
Also, I like card games.
I would prefer to play Game Pass on my PC, but I'm overdue for an upgrade, and an upgrade does not seem realistic.
Right.
It just doesn't.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. Well, not necessarily moving on like from the topic, but like back to the topic then. I don't think we can just mention one game each. So another one that comes to mind for PS3 is like a lot of the Tales games. There's a few. There's like Tales of Graces, which is a port from Wii, but
Xillia,
nonetheless. And then Xillia and Xillia 2. Metal Gear Solid 4.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's a game.
I want to actually look at my physical games, but I won't be able to talk into the mic while I'm looking. Do you have any? I'll take a look. I can still hear you.
Yeah, up until recently, I mean, Demon's Souls is one I would recommend, but that's now, as you mentioned, on PS5. It's funny, all the PS3 games that I like... Oh, well, wait, no. Did they put out... Oh, now I'm just not sure. Did they put out the Final Fantasy 13 trilogy on all consoles? Or was that just a PS3 thing?
That was PS3 and 360.
Okay.
In that generation.
So I would include those on
I remember
there
was a big stink because for some strange reason, like the sort of like console loyalty fanboyism like thing was really strong still at the time, and there was like Sony fans that were upset that Final Fantasy was releasing on Xbox.
I would say if you are a Final Fantasy fan, I know that...
Do you remember that?
Yeah, a bit. Yeah, now that you mention it. I know that people have divided opinions on those games, but they're not bad games. The stories are weird, so like I won't disagree with you if you think the stories are convoluted and don't make sense, but the game part of it looks like it's good and like it holds up in terms of like looks, and the soundtracks are all really good.
The 13 trilogy is also on Steam, by the way.
Yes. Yeah. So I got okay, good point. I guess you don't have to play that on. Man, all the ones I'm thinking of are like maybe not locked to that console.
I wonder if it's even on. I'm even thinking it might even be on Game Pass. Yeah, it's even on Game Pass.
I would say Dead Space,
the FF13 trilogy. There's a bunch of FF games on Game Pass. The 7, 8, 9, 10, and 10-2 HD remaster, 12 Zodiac Age, the 13 set, 15, all that's on Game Pass.
Man, Game Pass sounds like such a deal.
It's crazy. It's actually ridiculous.
It's too good. It's too good to be left alive.
It's way too good.
Man, I'm really thinking of PS3 games because even like another argument would be like, oh, you could play the original Nier, but that's no.
The other thing, actually, that comes to mind, so actually, just to address Nier, like I actually do think there's a case to be made for versioning. So, two cases to be made for versioning. One is like if you want to experience those differences, like somebody who's a really, really diehard Nier fan and thinks they might play the game twice anyway. I could imagine such a person wanting to play both the remake and the original, but you'd have to be like really into it. Like you're one of those people that doesn't play a little bit of everything. You're like, I just love Nier. you know people like that, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
And then the other case I want to make sometimes for like for this as well as like with version differences is sometimes like maybe a speed run or something might be dependent on like particular versions. And so like a really good example of this is Wind Waker HD. So in original Wind Waker, like barrier skip, which is like skipping the barrier in the Hyrule Castle under the ocean to go to the end of the game, like the first time you get down there.
It gets fixed later on.
No, it's actually kind of the other way around. So that was one of the most sought after skips in speedrunning for like almost a decade.
Right.
And then when Wind Waker HD came out, it was discovered in HD first. And then they discovered a skip finally in the original version. And the two are completely different because just the way the game is rebuilt.
But this is your argument for versioning for PS3 and Xbox games because there might be different things going on in the mechanics of how they work.
Yeah. And if you're a speedrunner, right, there might be a route that's just plain old more fun in one version of the game that's like not in the other one, or is more competitive, or you know what I mean? There is a tendency in speedrunning to prefer the original over the remake, just in general. Okay. Unless the remake turns out to be a more fun run, but that typically isn't the case.
Can I make a weird argument for the mountain of mediocrity I was talking about before? I think that the PlayStation 3 especially, and maybe even the Xbox 360, these like bargain bin games that are mechanically totally fine, just they don't do anything special, they're kind of fun to go back to sometimes because some of them aren't that bad. You know, everybody hates on Dark Void, but I beat that game. That game's not terrible. It works, and you can quote me on that.
It functions.
It functions. But, you know, like that kind of stuff is kind of... That's kind of what's fun about it.
It didn't become saturated for no reason. There was a time that people were, like, excited about that kind of thing genuinely before it became like I think people got tired of it more than it was completely bad.
Yes.
Like I don't think once in a while like kind of like a grim like Sandy Brown Blue Orange Milsim like kind of cheesy gritty game is like
Shadows of the Damned.
I'm not familiar with that one, but
yeah, like that game.
I don't really. I'm very familiar with like the trend of like all the games are just generally sepia tones and stuff like that. I'm not so familiar with the blue and orange that you say. When you say that, I immediately think Battlefield.
Yeah.
Am I right to think that?
Just kind of on a lot of covers at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
It was also on a lot of movie posters. Maybe that's something. Anyways, not the point. The point is that although I asked you for like your hits because I think the hits that make this like you can say Grand Theft Auto 4,
or what make the
Grand Theft Auto 5, Red Dead Redemption 1, like those classic games. The Gran Turismos that appeared on the PS3.
Good call with RDR1 because we still don't have access to that outside of the consoles, do we? Unless again backwards compat on Xbox One, but even
probably.
Still.
But like also like the Gran Turismo games, I don't think we have a way of playing them. So if you want to play 5 and 6, I believe they're on the PS3 only. And there's a bunch of stuff kind of like that, but then also there's all of these like B and C tier games that I think that there seems to be indies now, and then in the indie scene there's like the shovelware, and then there's AAA, but we're really seeing that B and C tier game thing fall away, and this is a topic that I have for another day that I want to talk about, but like I think that these consoles are just like this bastion of B and C tier games. Just like it's kind of like your summer blockbuster mindless action.
To be fair, I would argue that like some of the stuff that was B and C disappeared and some of it became AAA. So like one example that comes to mind is like even though they operate independently of a publisher, like because they work with different publishers all the time and stuff, so that like to me, AAA is technically it's about budget, but one of the surest signs is the publisher owns the developer.
Right. Yep.
So like I was hesitant for a while to call From Software a AAA, but now with like Sekiro and Elden Ring, like they just feel like they're 100% a AAA. But like at the time of Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1 in the 360 era, like that 100% felt like it was that B2. Like as far as budgets go and like I'm going to say technical quality, because while those games are really good, they were plagued by performance issues on
But I was going to
really
say
all platforms.
There's a feel to B and C tier games. So Dark Void is a B and C tier game. It's a silly game, but Dark Souls feels like it's aspiring to AAA and hits it sometimes. You know what I mean? Dark Void never does.
Okay, that may be.
Anyways.
But I guess all I'm trying to argue is that not all of them vanished. Some of them might have ascended.
True. Okay, then in a word, in a summary, in a conclusion, if you will, Xbox 360, PS3, worth it to go back to in 2021? What do you think? Yeah, I think so too.
There's actually one other thing that very briefly crossed my mind that I didn't get to mention, which is now it's typically common in the FGC fighting game community to play like either the absolute classics for old games like the Street Fighter 2 or like old arcade games like that, Street Fighter 3, like old KOFs and stuff like that. And it's not as common to play that like mid-generation and then to play like whatever the brand new game in the series is. But there are definitely a couple games in that 360 and PS3 era that never got ported forward or anything like that. That if you do like to play like some janky old fighting games that maybe you'll only find one or two people at your local that are interested in sitting down across from you for, there are some of those still on the platform. One thing that comes to mind is like Tekken Tag 2. Yeah, everyone moved on to Tekken 7, but sometimes people like to play one of the older, that can happen. Like I think 5 and 6 also. Also Persona 4 Arena Ultimax was like not on any other platform. You can only play it on a 360 or a PS3.
Very true.
I think there is technically emulation for the arcade version, but I have tried it and had some trouble getting it to work and look right.
Okay.
Anyway, that was the last thought I had of reasons to keep these old consoles around. But yeah, I think it's a generation worth keeping. I just think you have to know your taste and be discerning with what you choose to buy or pick up from this generation, because there are so many games in this generation. So like a little bit of like playing games that come from these platforms is going to come down to like figuring out, maybe even doing a little research and figuring out exactly what's out there and what you really want to play and what's not going to be for you if you don't like the gritty sepia shooters.
But also
or whatever other trends,
But also if you got like $5 and you really want to pick something up for a weekend that you want to forget about later, these consoles have a ton of that stuff. Just an absolute buttload.
There definitely is like the gamer who likes to fire up a game and play it with no intention. I mean, you and I are doing that in the SNESer Days series. Shout out to our YouTube.
Yeah.
Where, we're just playing like a lot of these games I never would have fired up otherwise, but giving them 15 minutes of attention is fun, even if they're not a game that fits my tastes, right? So like I could see spending $5 on some random like 360 game off the shelf that like you have no idea what it is, but it's probably just some kind of shovelware. It's like it can be entertaining for the jank alone if that's what it is, or hey, maybe it turned out
that it was actually pretty decent, or like anything could happen, right? So
some of those games did have some
the relatively
cool
low
ideas.
price, I think, of these platforms is makes the gamble pretty safe, I think.
Especially when the remasters have made the original versions even cheaper in some cases. But anyways, tell us what you think. PS3, Xbox 360, do you love it? Do you hate it? Is it too full of third-person action, cinematic, desaturated shooters, or is that just what you love about it? And with that, we're going to move on to what you got. What you got, Ben?
Okay, so what I want to talk about, and this is maybe a little bit of a contentious topic if you know anything about me, because I don't know anything about you. I've never met you before in my life. Because I don't own and have only briefly played VR.
Oh, okay.
But I want to speculate about the state of VR and whether or not it is, as a platform or a concept, at least currently, in danger. And so what I mean by this is Oculus, the brand Oculus, which was bought by Facebook several years ago, made a promise at the time that they would not be implementing like advertising or excessive telemetry and data metrics and stuff like that into Oculus. The Oculus would still run as Oculus, and just that they were owned by Facebook, so their profits were Facebook's profits or whatever, right?
Sure.
But of course, you know how these things go, and Facebook has been piloting advertising. And furthermore, Facebook has been saying that it's a test, and that based on user feedback and statistic results and stuff like that, they will decide whether or not to continue advertising. But I think that is just a way to soften the blow, because what company as big as Facebook and as shareholder driven as Facebook is going to say, well, the ads only profited us a little bit more than when we weren't running them.
We should probably
some users
not.
were annoyed but continued using Oculus products. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's really no way that they're not going to be permanently implemented now that it's on the table, right? So here's the issue, and the reason why I think this actually endangers VR more than just the current reach of Oculus. So there's a couple of issues. One of them is that Oculus runs its own store. And the Oculus store sometimes has had exclusives and could have more exclusives, and Oculus could start paying devs to become exclusive. So then you run into a situation where you might be a VR enthusiast who wants to play games, and you have an index. And you can actually play games off the Oculus store. I don't think it's officially supported on non-Oculus devices, but I believe there is like a wrapper that you can use that like kind of lets the Oculus store let you play its games because it thinks your Index or your HTC Vive or whatever is an Oculus device. Anyway, but you would still be subject to seeing that advertising and having an Oculus/Facebook account and sending all of the data and stuff like that. The other thing is that the Oculus devices are by far the current best price to like performance/feature or whatever ratio in VR hardware.
I'm not gonna lie, I was looking at one because of that, because I was interested in it over the pandemic, and I was looking at it, and you were telling me like maybe hold off due to the whole Facebook thing, and I was like, well, maybe it'll be okay, but like the other ones are just so expensive.
Well, as it turns out, you can figure out that the reason that the Oculus headsets are so cheap is because this data collection and advertising is the subsidy. And the reason you can tell it is not just because every other headset on the market is like 700, 800, 1,000 plus, whatever, but also because the exact same hardware for Oculus for Business, which you can go view the Oculus for Business page, like if you're buying them as a business to implement in like training or whatever, right? Which doesn't have the advertising telemetry, etc. The same device costs like 700 plus or 800, 1,000, whatever. It costs the same amount as other headsets do when you buy it without the things that Facebook finds profitable enough to subsidize the cost against, right? So they can just like massively increase their market share in VR. By selling the product cheaper than anyone else can compete with, because nobody else has an extra profit margin they can pull off the top of it like that, like Facebook can, right? Because nobody else is a social media platform collecting all that data. They're all hardware manufacturers, where like HTC has largely stepped out of it already, and they were at one time the headset to get, right? And then so at the end of the day, what's sort of happening is it's kind of Oculus's industry right now to just win at, you know what I mean? And
we all lose.
It's kind of unfortunate because like, you know what I mean? If there was any one maybe company I didn't want to be in charge of the entirety of a facet or mode of gaming. I don't really want to call it a genre. I guess it's not really a genre.
Yeah, you're right.
But I would have preferred it to not be Facebook. You know what I mean? So I'm a little upset about it. I've been pretty dramatically distrustful of Facebook for a while, and that was ramped up significantly with the incidents during the like prior elections recently. You know, the whole like Cambridge Analytica and all this stuff, right? I'm just very distrustful of Facebook now, and I would like to be optimistic about VR, but unfortunately feel that it's kind of threatened by the presence of Facebook / Oculus. I do think the two sort of potential saviors, or like, I don't want to say saviors, but like the companies that maybe are making VR products that are both good and will be well supported regardless of what Facebook and Oculus do, I think are going to be Valve, because Valve will just make hardware to push the industry. They have done that before. When Valve, the reason Valve made the Steam devices that were supposed to be like a standalone device that runs Steam games, and essentially it was based on Linux, which Linux gamers absolutely love them for doing because it increased like Linux compatibility significantly in the PC gaming market. Valve did that literally as a response to not liking certain actions Microsoft was taking with Windows 10, like trying to like leaning towards locking things into like the Windows Store and stuff like that, because like Steam, like Valve knows that they're dependent to a certain extent on Microsoft behaving a certain way and not behaving in certain ways in order for Steam to be a successful service, right?
This was actually something I was going to ask you about when you were talking about this. Do you think that Facebook taking over this whole market in this way
could push a response from others to like create an open market?
Yeah, like I'm the thing that you mentioned though that I'm most cautious about in that though is the market share over. So if they own the market share now and they start having exclusives that only work on Oculus, then you run into a situation where it doesn't matter if other people are producing hardware. If the games people want to play are on the Facebook platform and they're going to feed you ads while you do it, you're kind of stuck still, right?
Yeah, exactly. The other sort of out into VR without this being a problem that is obvious to me is the PSVR, because for Sony, this is accessorizing their console and doesn't have anything to do with competing in the PC VR space.
That honestly,
so like whatever Oculus and Facebook do is pretty much irrelevant to Sony with PSVR, other than games that will be multi-platform between PC and PlayStation VR. So anyway, I just wanted to get that last thought out there because I did mean to mention both. But yeah, to the question of what the response will be, if that's what you mean, like what will the response be?
Well, I don't know.
To market share?
What I was going to say about the PSVR is that you're right. There are going to be companies that just do their own thing and they won't care. And in fact, PSVR is probably the one that I personally would look at if I was to get into VR after looking at the options on PC. Even though the PC one seems like there's, some more stuff available and whatnot, it's just for the lack of hassle, I would rather just play on PSVR. It seems kind of separate from everything, and it has a couple less things, but it still has a lot of the same sort of stuff, So that's fine with me. I haven't done this, obviously, but that would be probably where I went with that.
I think for me, I have to admit that the number one game I'm most interested in trying in VR is Half-Life Alyx.
Of course.
PSVR just doesn't cut it.
Yeah.
However...
Could you use the PSVR headset, though? Like, how you can use PlayStation controllers and Xbox controllers with Steam games?
I'm actually not that familiar with VR, so I don't know this, but I can look it up.
Let us know out there in internet land if you can.
The other thing I want to know is, like, Valve typically doesn't release their games on PC, or hasn't released many of them on PC, but it's not on... I mean on console. Jesus.
Right.
Valve typically doesn't release their games on consoles, but they have done so before. Like, the Orange Box had a console release. Portal 2, Left 4 Dead all had console releases. Yep. But for a while, there wasn't any console releases of Valve games. So I have to wonder if maybe they don't like the PS4 gen, or they even wouldn't like be happy with the performance of the PS4 gen of PSVR, like PSVR 1.
Okay.
We would essentially call it. But maybe if and Sony has publicly stated, by the way, that they are working on a PSVR successor that'll be aimed at PS5. PS4 PSVR will still work on a PS5.
Sure.
But they're planning to like make a refresh essentially that's like focused on what the PS5 can actually push.
Yeah.
So if that version turns out to be something that Valve looks at and goes, you know what, that's good enough for Half-Life Alyx. Maybe it's time for a console port. If that happens, I might also agree that I could be more comfortable with PSVR over a PC VR solution, which is crazy. I almost can't believe I'm saying it, right? Because I've been a PC gamer primarily my entire life, right? But just these days, with the prices of hardware, like we've already had this conversation earlier today, it's just feels like unobtainium to me. And when you add on like VR headsets and things like that, and then we have the Oculus problem, which is like kind of terrifying as well. Like I've never been less optimistic about PC gaming as I am now, and that includes VR with the Facebook situation.
It does suck that that whole way of interacting with games is plagued with such nonsense right now. The idea of ads in a virtual reality situation to me just seems so weird. Like,
it seems pretty dystopian to me.
Well, it's also kind of like that's supposed to be, in my mind, virtual reality is the ultimate game escape. Exactly. The ultimate game escape, right? And so when you put it on, does it just like show you a YouTube video first? Like that sucks.
Right. It was integrated into the games that it was tested in.
Like what, like billboards would say like buy Coca-Cola?
Yeah, exactly.
But that's still silly. Like
the only time I've ever been, I think, okay with real world advertising in games has literally been sports games when they put them on the boards around the arena where there are already advertisements in real life.
Right.
Because in a weird sort of way, that lends to the realism of that because you would expect to see advertising there.
You know what time?
But that's like literally the only place where I think I'm okay with it. Because if you look at...
I was going to say, you know what time I was really happy with product placement in a video game?
You're going to say Death Stranding.
No, but that's also funny. No.
In Death Stranding, I found it really memeable, but it also, I was keenly aware of it and felt a little weird about it at times. But okay, what's your...
This is also memeable. The infamous Cup O' Noodles quest in Final Fantasy
14. 15, yeah.
It's just like so out of place, and all the voice actors have like these hilarious lines, which is like, "What are you eating over there, Gladiolus?" He's like, "This is cup of noodles. It's a meal in a pot. And just add water, and it's delicious." You're like,
and the Coleman camping equipment.
Yeah, it's so fun.
it's so weird.
It's so weird.
I don't... Okay, but here's the thing. I actually think that a product placement, an in-world product placement, is like less of an issue. Like, I actually don't mind as much to see Sam Bridges drink Monster as I was for the Norman Reedus ride advertisement on the shower in Death Stranding, because the product placement is as product placement as it is still being shown to be in world. They are making an effort to integrate it in some way. Putting the advertisement on the shower now feels like the video game has become a billboard, and that latter is what I have seen, at least personally, from like shots and footage of the VR implementations in PSVR.
Yeah, it just sucks.
Not PSVR. Sorry, Oculus. Oculus.
It just sucks because you know that all these ad execs are just sitting back looking like, look at all these people play games for hours on end. That's hours that we don't have their engagement. We can just be showing them ads in the game so they don't know they're being advertised to. And you're just sitting there being like, oh, this is why people play games, to escape the real world. I don't want billboards for, Advil and World of Warcraft. Like,
it's not right, man. It just
weird.
Rubs me the wrong way. And I will say, I should even say too that, like, regarding the product placement line, like, I'm not excusing it if it's done as a placement. It just, to me, is like, it's just a lesser degree. That's all I'm saying. And I still don't prefer it.
Can I say that this is why I like Nintendo? Because they have so much money that they don't do any of this stuff ever, except for when they do, because they occasionally do, but most of the time they don't.
Yeah.
Like the Mercedes-Benz stuff in Mario Kart 8.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. It's really weird.
It is really weird.
Really, really weird.
But it's also like, if that's how Nintendo does that, that's so almost silly to the point of not even being a problem.
One of the times when I think I'm completely okay with it, and we call it advertising. Like we can call it advertising, even though really it's crossover, right? Is like crossover content. So like a good example in my mind is like, so at first the thing I thought of was like, okay, like the Dragon Quest had an FF14, but that's just Square and Square. So like, whatever, that's just having fun with it, right? But maybe the better example that uses something external would be like the Monster Hunter trial, and like the Rathalos trial and the Monster Hunter equipment and stuff like that in FF14. It's like, that is essentially advertising, but the reason I think it doesn't bother me is because they also did an FF14 thing in Monster Hunter World, so it went both ways.
Cross promotion.
It gave both games content. People who play one game or the other are, I'm not going to say likely, but are
probably familiar.
Maybe familiar or even like willing to check out the other game already.
But that's games.
And you're like, it's games and games. Like it's not like games and a motorcycle TV show about Norman Reedus. I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I mean though. Yeah, because like, so you said sports games, but I'm thinking even Gran Turismo and like Forza, they have licensed cars and licensed parts and licensed a lot of stuff.
It feels appropriate there, though.
Of course it feels appropriate, because whenever you play a car game where everything's made up, it doesn't feel real.
Yeah.
You know, when all the car brands are like, like one letter off from real ones?
I think if the setting of the game is like real world now or in recent history where these brands existed,
sure,
or something like that, I think it's like okay. One exception though to this, maybe for example, is like I would really hate to see real advertising come to Grand Theft Auto, because I think the thing in Grand Theft Auto is that
I don't think they do that.
No, they don't. That's what I'm saying.
I'm saying I don't think they would, because their whole thing is taking the piss out of them.
Because Grand Theft Auto is like really satirizing America, right? And it has advertising in it, but all the advertising is fake and is part of the satire of America. Like it's not advertising real brands, it's advertising parodies of real brands. And so what I'm trying to say though is I would hate to see that come to something like Grand Theft Auto, because it would displace something that makes Grand Theft Auto great.
Gotcha. Yep.
However, other than a situation like that, I think if like the game takes place in like the real world, so like Forza is a good example, or sports games are a good example, and is like modern and stuff like that, and it is integrated in a place where an advertisement would be in the actual real world, like on a billboard or on the boards of a hockey arena, or is the brand of the car that you're going to drive in the game or something. Like in these places, I'm actually so much less averse to it, even though I know it's literally the same thing, because it doesn't take me out of it, because I'm seeing it somewhere where I'm already used to the idea that it would be seen.
Also,
and if the game likes realism, at least in presentation, maybe the gameplay isn't that realistic or whatever, but in presentation and visuals or whatever, then then like who am I to complain? Like I'm just gonna not look at it. But it's hard to say just don't look at it when it's like, I don't know, a fantasy game, and then like on the wall there's like a poster to like buy Red Bull.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yep. No, I do know exactly what you mean. I mean, yeah. The thing about car games that's funny is like the brands of cars, like cars are expensive things, whether it's for utility or for luxury. So it's like, it's almost like the advertisements kind of go straight over my head, because I think the majority of people...
You're not even the target.
Yeah, the majority of people...
The majority of people who want it don't need to see it in a video game to want it.
Well, also I was going to say, the majority of people playing Gran Turismo or Forza probably aren't the same people that can afford like, McLarens and Lamborghinis and stuff.
They just go drive their real McLaren or Lamborghini.
Those people who do that, yeah, exactly. I'm not saying that people who play video games can't afford that stuff. That's definitely not true, obviously. I'm just saying I think...
Linguini.
Linguini. I just think that
they go drive their Linguini.
I just think, like, for me personally, as somebody who, like, cannot afford a luxury sports car, you know, when I see the licensed luxury sports car in a video game,
the fantasy that's happening in the video game is more real.
Is more real than it feels like it doesn't feel like I'm being advertised to because I'm clearly not their market. Do you know what I mean? But it's just really cool that's there for me.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah. So it's interesting because there are caveats to advertising and gaming that seems okay, but yeah. I think another problem with VR that makes it dramatically more of an issue than like screen gaming is the sense of immersion and escapism is more powerful and more desired of that type of a gaming platform than like flat screen gaming, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, I think that people are going to be a lot more averse to it, except for like in like the racing game type situations. So it's kind of...
I hope they just don't do it.
Yeah.
I hope they back away from that ledge and never go back. You know what I mean? Just like they just step away and they go, yeah, it was a bad idea. We should not have talked about that. That would be cool.
Man, I really don't see that happening, unfortunately.
No,
I wish, but I don't see it. Okay, so
advertising in games, we're not fans.
It's interesting. The topic ended up being a little bit more advertising in games and a little bit less the danger that is presently posed to VR. But I do really want to highlight that I feel that it's kind of a weird, precarious, and maybe even a little bit urgent of a situation,
100%.
even though it's funny to say something's urgent when we are just consumers and can't really do a whole lot about it. But just think about it when you buy. I'm not going to encourage boycotts and stuff like that too. I know there's no such thing as like, you know, you can't, you just buy the product or don't buy the product because you're not going to be able to stop anyone else from buying the product or whatever like that, right? But just, I don't know, think about what's going to happen if Oculus's market share becomes too big. And I mean, the Index is a better experience anyway. If you can save, you go for it. If you can't save, I can't blame you for buying
Or just get PSVR and just accept that you'll never play Half-Life Alyx.
Yeah. Come on, Valve. PSVR 2, do it. I think the problem is PSVR has so I actually am embarrassed to admit that I don't know this. In PSVR, do you just play with the DualShock, or do you use the PlayStation Move controllers? Because I think maybe the problem might be if you just play with the DualShock, like that wouldn't support something like Half-Life Alyx. Or does it have motion controllers? You need motion controllers for like PC VR games generally.
I think it does a bit of a lot because I've seen people use like a gun attachment. I've seen people use the DualShock. It really depends. I think it depends on what you're playing. I'm not quite sure what it comes with. I know that you can just get the headset by itself, and some games support that. I'm not sure regarding the hand stuff, though.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Well, let us know what you think out there about Facebook taking over all of VR gaming and advertisements in games in general, because there's a lot of thoughts, obviously, on this.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Do you want to move on to backlog? Close this one out? All right.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Here we go to Backlog Land.
You know what it is, it's the backlog.
All right, we're here in Backlog Land. I talked first, you talked. I'm going to go first. Yeah, okay, cool, that makes sense. My backlog game was mentioned in the Nintendo Direct.
So then did we mention it in the E3 episode?
Gosh, did we?
I don't know. Okay. Well, I mean, of course I don't know. I don't know what game you're talking about.
Well, I just got, yeah.
I'm like, don't know.
No, it's true. I should have
I'm having one of those days.
Well, because we talked about a lot of games from that thing, but I think I want to focus in.
Yeah, we did.
I think I want to focus in on one.
Okay, so what is it?
I want to focus in on. So we talked about like a lot of things that I wanted to play. Like obviously Metroid Dread. I said Shin Megami Tensei 5. I think was like my main one that I really wanted to play. I was putting that in my future backlog because I haven't finished one and I want to finish one. It's all coming back to me.
Oh yeah.
But one that I want to focus on that I actually do really want to play is the Advance Wars re-battle or whatever it's called. Because
actually, very funny that you mentioned this because I was thinking I was gonna text you about this game today and about the fact that I'm gonna hold off on buying it probably for a long time. But go ahead and tell me more, and I'll tell you why I have the opposite opinion.
Yeah. I just never really played them back in the day. I have the DS one. I had a good time with it. I didn't finish it. I had a good time with it. And I was thinking about, I don't know, so every once in a while I just kind of get this like, oh, I should play a strategy game. It's kind of fun. but I don't want to get into like the grind, like with Final Fantasy Tactics and some of those other games. So these kinds of smaller engagements, those are good time. And this just came at the right time. I love the art style. It looks really fun, vibrant. I feel like it'll be a really good game to have mobile on the Switch for when things are kind of opening back up again and we're going places and traveling. I just think it's going to be like a great little companion. I think that between that and the Link's Awakening thing, Nintendo is, I hope, starting to tap into the amazing handheld back catalog they have that for some reason they have been absolutely neglecting on the Switch. The Switch's idea was like, we'll bring console games on the road. And it's just like, yeah, that's great. But sometimes I don't want to play a console game on the road. Sometimes I want to play like I want to play Link's Awakening HD or I want to play Advance Wars. You know what I mean? Like, I think the Switch needs more games like that. And Metroid Dread is a great step in the right direction too. And if these rumors of the Final Fantasy, oh my god, I got Final Fantasy on the brain. If the rumors of the Castlevania Advance collection going up on the ratings board, if that's true and that's coming, that's another great sort of throwback to this era of gaming that seems to be neglected on their current handheld console. I know there are some throwback collections. You have the Sega collection. You have the like the Mana collection. So there's a little bit of that kind of stuff going on. A little bit of these older handheld games and whatnot. But I do think that that the Advance Wars is a great step in the right direction to the halcyon days of the Game Boy Advance. And I hope we see a lot more games like it. To be completely honest, I really do. And not a lot else to say about it. It's just I'm going to buy it, and it looks great. I'm pumped. So that's my backlog pick.
Cool. Yeah, the reason why I'm holding off on Advance Wars specifically, not that I don't think it's a fantastic game. I've played Advance Wars 1 and 2 a little bit.
Sure.
And I agree with you. I also played tons of Dual Strike. There was a time, I think, where that game just was in my DS for like over a year. I just didn't play anything else on it. Loved it. So for me, the reason why I think is actually just because of other stuff that's already sort of in the way. Like, I can't justify it when I have Fire Emblem Three Houses, and then also especially when I have Wargroove.
You got other backlog games that are getting in the way.
That are very similar. Like Wargroove is basically an indie attempt at Advance Wars. It's not.
It's got a fantasy vibe though.
Yeah, it's fantasy. It's not modern. So it plays. It's interesting because the units, I will say, like, they don't have the class system or anything like that, but the units are created out of like barracks and stuff, just like Advance Wars. It plays way more like Advance Wars than Fire Emblem. But I will say that the units, because you have like more like, well, actually no, to be fair, because you have like archers, which are kind of like artilleries, and then you have like you can have flyers. And so actually, yeah, I'd say it parallels Advance Wars really strongly. I think actually the one major difference is that your commander, like your CO or whatever, is actually a unit on the field.
Oh, kind of like Warcraft 3.
Yeah, and then so there's special like ability or whatever, like the CO power.
Yeah.
It's called a groove. It's called like a war groove or whatever, and it actually like often is something that like affects like units that are surrounding your commander. So like if you think, for example, of like Nell in Advance was like crit chance goes up, right? So if it was like Wargroove, she would be a unit on the field and it would probably be like everything in a radius of her. The crit chance goes up.
Okay.
Or sometimes it actually does an effect where it like damages like an AoE on the arena or hits a random thing, like, because they can be a little bit different. But yeah, it tends to be a little more localized around the actual commander unit. And then also I think if it dies, you lose. So you have to be a bit protective of it, but they're also really strong. So you can also make great use of it. I kind of like that extra element to it. But anyway, the whole point isn't to compare Wargroove to Advance Wars. The point is essentially that it's a really similar game that is of a really high quality, even though it is sort of the indie version of the AAA game. So to my mind, it kind of feels like if I buy Advance Wars, I'm going to sideline Wargroove, but Wargroove still deserves my attention.
Sure.
So I kind of just, I'm going to be putting off Advance Wars probably for a pretty long time in favor of getting Fire Emblem Three Houses done because it's possibly multiple playthroughs, and Wargroove done because I just want to make sure that I don't neglect it by buying Advance Wars.
Sure. That makes sense. Well, I also hope they bring Super Robot Wars.
I think Advance Wars is going to be an excellent game that anyone who's interested should buy. I'm not trying to say like don't buy it because Wargroove exists.
No, definitely.
It's just my
it.
personal library and the circumstances.
Definitely buy it. So Nintendo also brings Super Robot Wars back. I mean, I think that series has continued on very fine in Japan. It's just there's 2 Game Boy Advance games in that series that are like really, really awesome, and I just want more.
Cool. For me, what
you got?
Backlog. I guess it's a game that we mentioned literally today, but I'm going to mention the 7 remake Yuffie chapter specifically. So I'm planning now that I've got my PS5 to play the entire remake again.
Play it on hard.
I might. I haven't actually figured out. I don't know. I'm kind of assuming that the Yuffie chapter is something I can just pick from the title screen, kind of like episode Prompto or episode whatever from.
It's separate.
Cool. So I think I'm just gonna go ahead and play it right off the bat.
That seems fair. Oh, apparently, its ending cutscene is like people are like, yes. They're like people are stoked for Remake 2 now again, even though after Remake 1 people were like, I don't know about this.
So I didn't see its ending cutscene, but I did see a couple of the cutscenes from around the middle, including a really hilarious scene where Yuffie introduces herself to a couple guards, and it's not the ones from the trailer. It's like the background changes. Like she's like in a place in Midgard, but like the background changes, and it's like a dramatic, like it's really theatrical.
Okay.
This like introduction she does of herself, and it's like really awesome and really cool. And it's just like it's cool because it's I think the reason it looks really cool to me is because it's so heavily focused on one character, whereas like base FF7 remake is focused on like Cloud, Tifa, Barrett, Aerith, and like you know what I mean. So it's like they all have tons of personality. These characters always have. But it's the game isn't putting a spotlight on any one of them too much.
Yep.
Except I'd say it puts a pretty heavy spotlight on Aerith when you first meet her. But in the case of the Yuffie chapter, from what I understand, it's like all about her, and she is like the star of the show, and like it's really cool in that way.
I don't think you can even play as the second character.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
You can. As far as I know, you can't. So I find this really interesting because I want to see what the 7 remake style is like when you have a singular character that is really like the star of their own show in this piece of content. Like I think that sounds like a cool, exciting, it sounds fun, it sounds bombastic. Like it just sounds like a bit of a different, I feel like it's going to be a different mood in kind of the same game that I played before. So I'm excited to like take it as like a twist on 7 remake, even though it's like a different section of the story, right? But you know what I mean, right?
Yes.
Like it's like a twist on the formula, right? So So I'm really eager. I'm really excited for that one, and I'm calling it Backlog, but I'm literally going to be firing it up at some point later tonight. So it's a backlog game. I'm getting moving on really quick.
Supposedly it's short, like 5 or 6 hours long. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not even going to be on the backlog for that long, is it?
Man, I'm going to be waiting forever.
I'm sorry, man. Hopefully soon you
here's what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Once it's safe.
Are you gonna start visiting like shoppers every day or something?
No, I was just gonna say I'll just come over.
Oh yeah, sure. And once we're all vaccinated and everything, absolutely.
Just let me play Yuffie on yours, Uffie.
Yeah, you're welcome to do that.
Heck yeah. Maybe I'll get a PS5 before then. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, I'll also keep the eye out for the PS5 because either I got super lucky or maybe it's not terribly difficult. I don't know. To be fair, I did attempt multiple times to add non-bundles to my cart even after I had purchased the bundle, and I was never able to actually get all the way through checkout with one before it set out of stock. So I think it could be that the bundles are less popular because people don't want to spend the extra like $200.
Yeah, I might gotta take the leap. Get me some Spider-Man or Ratchet and Clank.
Yeah, it'd be nice if they were running like a Demon Souls bundle or something like that, because then it'd be like, I would have been thrilled with that. I would have just been, I mean, I sound so bummed out. Like, I'm sure Ratchet and Clank is going to be awesome.
They say it's like the headlining game for that console. They say it's the best looking game. I just don't
understand what it is. I've never really been exposed to it. I think that's all it is. I just have no hype because I'm not familiar. I probably really like it. The other thing is, oh no, I lost my train. Oh, the other thing is, we have a Shoppers. You're kind of right in between 2 Shoppers Drug Marts, right? And
one of them doesn't really have consoles and stuff, though.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, we'll talk about that after if we're going to talk about specific locations. But the one that's between you and I've seen consoles there, and
well, that's what I was talking about.
Okay, yeah, no, I've seen consoles there before. They're usually behind the cashier, and so the thing about them is they tend to get their stock like quite early in the morning, like once a week, and it's like kind of unannounced. The websites don't track stock or anything like that. So if you can, like, I don't know, if you make a habit of taking a morning walk or something, you might just spot it in the window. And
how much is that PS5 in the window?
Yeah,
does it cost as much
I'm just
as
throwing
my
the
rent?
idea out there if you're trying to get one. If there's any Canadians trying to get them out there, Shoppers Drug Mart is notoriously bad for having up-to-date stock on a per-store basis. So, like, I don't know what weekday they normally stock, but I know that Shoppers Drug Mart stocks pretty frequently their stores. And so that actually might be one of your best bets to try to get an MSRP PS5 or Xbox Series X or something like that. Yeah. Anyway.
Hot tips.
I think that's it.
So, as per usual, let us know what you think. You can find us on Twitter at TPCC_podcast. You can find us on YouTube at This Podcast Cannot Continue. We're going to be uploading this episode. We're going to be uploading more Snester Days, some demo disc possibly in the near future. We got stuff coming out, so check us out. Yeah,
I have a little bit of free time myself, so I was considering recording a demo disc episode of my own. I've got some ideas floating around, so possibly something to look forward to on the YouTube.
I'm looking forward to that. I want to see what you come up with. So
I know you got one you're editing.
It's almost done. I'll leave that as a surprise for everybody out there. It'll come out probably in the next week. So thanks for listening, and for now, this podcast cannot continue.